Hey guys, what's up? It is the one and only RJ21 here, and today I'm going to be recapping the events of week 4 of Big Brother Canada 12 and giving my updated power rankings. Week 4 starts off with a quiz comp. It's basically just a bunch of trivia questions about the trophy room, where if you get the question right, you stay in the competition, but if you get it wrong, you're out. The competition comes down to Elijah and Victoria, with Elijah coming out on top as victorious, winning his first HOH of the season and finally securing that he's not going to be a pawn this week. Now, coming into this week, Elijah actually has a lot of options available. He can choose to stay loyal to the directors and target one of the outsiders in either Bayleigh, Todd, Tola, or Vivek, or he can choose to make a big move in targeting the showmans in Lexus and Matt. However, he does eventually come to the conclusion that it is too early to be targeting Lexus and Matt, so he decides to target one of the outsiders. But he can't exactly figure out which of the outsiders to target. He does have an interesting conversation with Tola that definitely does sway his opinions. In this conversation with Tola, Tola reveals to Elijah that there was a serious push to keep Dennis in the house and vote to evict Elijah, which Elijah was completely unaware of. Tola name drops two of the women in Bayleigh and Kayla, with Kayla especially being the name that shocks Elijah, as Elijah really thought that he had a really strong bond with Kayla. So to confront this issue, Elijah takes Kayla to Wendy's and just tells her straight up that Tola has been throwing her name out there and throwing her under the bus, to which Kayla denies, and denies hard, saying that she was one of the people who was trying to keep Elijah in the house the most, which, to be fair, is pretty accurate considering how Kayla was one of the only women who wasn't strongly considering or strongly entertaining the idea of keeping Dennis in the house over Elijah. This realization sends Kayla into a tailspin as she laments to Anthony about how Tola has been throwing her name under the bus and how Tola is now her number one target and how Tola needs to go home, to the point where even Anthony is shocked that Tola is doing this and can't believe that Tola would do something to blow up his game like this. All in all of this information just reaffirms to Elijah what he needs to do this week. So at the nomination ceremony, he chooses to nominate Todd and Tola with the intention of backdooring Bayleigh, because Bayleigh was one of the women who is trying to push for him to go home last week over Dennis. Now, Todd and Tola, along with Anthony, Lexus, and Bayleigh, are all selected to compete in the Power Veto competition. This veto was basically a set of mini games where you would try and bet how much time it would take you to complete the competition, where the person who bet the lowest amount of time would then have to go and try to do it, where if they were successful in completing it in the allotted amount of time they bet, they would move on and they can choose someone to eliminate from the competition. But if they fail, they're eliminated from the competition themselves. Ultimately, the final two comes down to Bayleigh and Lexus, and they have to face off in a head-to-head competition, with Lexus coming out on top and winning the power of veto. Now, the plan should be pretty straightforward. Use the power of veto on either Todd or Tola, Bayleigh goes up, and then they just flip the vote on whichever guy stays up on the block. However, things get complicated as Elijah tries to start planting seeds of doubt, trying to create a divide, unintentionally or not. He creates a divide within the directors between Anthony's side and Victoria's side, where Elijah is essentially insinuating that Matt is trying to pin them against each other, and how Matt is trying to say that the girls are untrustworthy and that Elijah should be siding with them, which absolutely irritates all of the women in the house, to the point where they make a very significant push to where if Lexus were to use the power veto to save Tola, they would push hard for Elijah to put up Matthew instead of Bayleigh. Obviously, Victoria, playing both sides of the house, doesn't want to ruin her relationship with Lexus. So Victoria goes to Lexus and tells Lexus about this plan, saying that if she were to use the power of veto, she would be drawing a line in the sand and things like that. So at the veto ceremony, Lexus chooses not to use the power of veto, keeping Elijah's nominations intact by keeping Todd and Tola on the block and stopping the backdoor of Bayleigh plan from progressing any further, blindsiding Elijah as he fully expected Lexus to follow through on the plan to take out Bayleigh. After the veto ceremony, Elijah confronts basically everyone in the house, which sends himself into a tailspin where he finally realizes that he got played, and he got played hard, and he immediately starts regretting his decisions, lamenting about how he should have put Bayleigh up on the block initially and how it was foolish of him for even trying to backdoor him. And it was just a really, really messy week for him, where he made himself an even bigger target than he should have. But this week was unlike any other week, as there was a big twist to disrupt the final end of the week. The executive power of veto is found to be missing. Maybe it was stolen, it's just missing, it's gone. So where can they find it? At an executive meeting, of course, where it is revealed that the executive power of veto is coming into play this week. The executive power of veto works like this. They need to determine who would get the power of veto in the first place. So to decide that, they would have a chain of rejection, which is the opposite of a chain of safety. Basically, Elijah would pick somebody to not receive the power. Then that person would select another person, so on and so forth, until one person is left remaining, and that person would hold the executive power of veto. Now, the executive power of veto doesn't work like a regular power of veto. If the holder of the executive power of veto chooses to use it on one of the nominees, the head of household would not name the replacement nominee, but instead, the nominee who was just vetoed off of the block would name the replacement nominee, absolutely shaking things up. The executive power of veto goes like this. Elijah chooses Tola, Tola chooses Bayleigh, Bayleigh chooses Vivek, Vivek chooses Todd, Todd chooses Lexus, Lexus chooses Matthew, Matthew chooses Kayla, and Kayla chooses Anthony, leaving Anthony with the decision to decide between Avery or Victoria, ending up with the executive power of veto. Ultimately, Anthony chooses Avery, rejecting her from getting the power and leaving Victoria with the executive power of veto. Now, both Todd and Tola are campaigning to Victoria hard, saying that they want her to use it on them and that they'll put up whoever she wants. And Victoria decides to come up with the name of targeting Vivek and getting Vivek out of the house. And both of them agree to do that. Initially, Victoria wants to use the power of veto on Tola. However, the women bring up a very valid point that if Tola were to have the option, he wouldn't put up Vivek like Victoria wants, but rather he would put up Bayleigh, and then Bayleigh would possibly go home. And with Victoria not wanting to risk that, Victoria decides to use the power, the executive power of veto on Todd. Now, with Todd having the power of veto, he decides to avenge Dennis and chooses to nominate Vivek, absolutely blindsiding him. Before the eviction vote takes place, Vivek has one final round of pleas, trying to beg everyone to stay in the house. It was a desperate cry for help and a desperate plea to try and stay in the game. Now, this voting ceremony actually plays out a bit differently than a regular voting ceremony. Instead of everyone going into the diary room one by one to cast their votes in private, they would write down their votes in secret and then publicly reveal them to the entire house, including to the nominees, which just adds an extra layer of brutalness. Ultimately, it is revealed that despite Vivek's pleas, Vivek is evicted in a unanimous 8-0 vote, officially becoming the fourth house guest to be evicted from the Big Brother Canada 12 house. Now it's time to get into the power rankings. At number 11, the most recently evicted house guest, and my preseason winner pick, we have Vivek. And literally everybody called it. Everybody knew exactly what was going to happen once Vivek backdoored Dennis. Everybody knew what was going to happen, and what everybody thought was going to happen happened exactly how they thought it was going to happen. I'm saying that a lot because everybody knew it. Everybody called it. Literally the exact same reasoning everybody has been calling him out for is what they used against him. Everybody was saying that Vivek is going to come off as untrustworthy, where if he's willing to backdoor and blindside his number one ally, he's willing to blindside and backstab anybody. And that is the literal reasoning Todd used to put Vivek up on the block. It's so funny how Vivek made that move for quote-unquote the house and to try and gain some sort of social capital, but it literally doesn't pay off for him as he is taken out the very next week. To be fair, it is very valid to say that he was twist screwed. I mean, He wasn't even on the block come eviction. He wasn't even on the block before this executive power veto came into play. But in all honesty, if he doesn't go home this week, he probably goes home next week. So all in all, it just reaffirms that him taking out Dennis was not the right move. And that is going to have to stick with his big brother legacy for like ever. I mean, Vivek's run on this season was very bad. He plays his first week horribly by talking and strategizing with way too many people, throwing way too many people under the bus, and being way too messy to the point where he is the number one target coming into week 2 and is saved through no actual work of his own, but rather other people doing worse work than him. So Vivek gets lucky in that sense. And then with his HOH, he chooses to take out his number one ally in an attempt to gain social capital, which is ultimately unsuccessful as he's taken out the very, very next week. All in all, his run on the season was really bad, and him getting taken out with the reasoning that literally everybody in the community was calling it out for happening just proves how bad of a move it was, and just proves how bad Vivek's run was on this season, ultimately ending up him up here at number 11. Now it's time to talk about the house guests that are actually still in the house. At number 10, the person I believe to be in the worst position in the house is Tola, and he literally almost went home this week. Like, had it not been for the executive power veto, Tola would have gone home wholeheartedly. Like, the votes were there, he would have gone home. And I don't think he realizes how close he was to going home. I mean, he thought he had the vote of Victoria to stay when that was just completely false. Like, Tola is not in a very good position, and I don't think he realizes how bad of a position he is in. Despite him not actually being that big of a threat, everybody on the opposite side of the house from him perceives him as this very big threat that needs to be taken out sooner rather than later. And I see him being in a lot of immediate danger. Within these upcoming weeks, I don't know if he's going to have the ability to persuade people to go after other people. I think Tola has made it very clear who he wants to target and who he is working with. So with that in mind, he's not going to waver on that at all. He's going to stay resolute in who he has. And the side that he is staying with, he's on the bottom of that totem pole. And I don't think he even realizes he's on that bottom. He doesn't realize he's just a pawn for Anthony's side. He really thinks that like he has this like final two with Anthony and they're going to be ride or die pals into the end. Like, Tola genuinely thinks this, and he's not doing any sort of effective work to try and better his position with the other side in the house. He's kind of become resolute in the fact that he's like, yeah, I'm a target for the other side of the house, but you know, that's just who I am. You know, I always knew I was gonna be a big threat. Like, no, you should be trying to strategize and trying to actively work to mitigate your threat level. But instead, he's just kind of taking it on the chin and almost wearing it as like a badge of honor with how big of a threat he is. And I see him going home very soon. So with all of that in mind, I have to keep Tola here at number 10. At number 9, I have Elijah. And I was so close, and I mean so close, to put in Elijah at number 10 as the person I believe to be in the worst position, but I decided not to, as there are still a few upsides to his current position. Let's just make it like very clear. Elijah had a horrible HOH week. I don't know if it was necessarily as bad as like Vivek's HOH, but it definitely wasn't good. He overplayed his hand so hard. He unnecessarily planted seeds of doubt within his own alliance. The alliance that he's claiming that he's trustworthy with, he's throwing basically everybody in that alliance under the bus to other people in the alliance. And then these people are talking because they're in an alliance. And they're all coming to the realization that Goose is spreading misinformation and Goose is spreading lies and trying to pin everybody against one another. And that's horrible. Like, all Elijah had to do this week was just nominate, like, do everything he did this week, but then just like not talk. All he had to do was nominate Todd and Tola, send one of them home, and then he's good. He still has that pawn position, and he is still technically at the bottom of that alliance, but at least he's still in that alliance with trust. Like, everybody in the house trusted Elijah, but coming out of this HOH week, he's now a much bigger target. Like, everybody saw him as an expendable pawn, but now he's both an expendable pawn and an actual target. Like, people now actively want to send Elijah home. And you should not be coming out of your HOH week in a worse position than when you went into it. Like, at least with Vivek, he built some supposed social capital with other people, but with Elijah, he's actively worsened his position by ruining trust with the people he had very close bonds with. I mean, he perceived Victoria as like his number one ride or die ally. And now Victoria is one of the biggest opponents to Elijah, and one of the biggest people trying to send Elijah out of the house. And Elijah, I don't think he realizes that. So all in all, he plays this week horribly. The only reason I didn't put him at number 10 in the worst position is that he can still be used as pawn material. While he is seen as a big threat, I don't think he's as big of a threat, or as perceived as big of a threat as Tola. And he still does have some like resemblances of people wanting to work with him, but it's still nothing solid, and it's still nothing to really gloat about. So because of that, I have to keep Elijah here at number 9. At number 8, I have Todd. And while Todd is still playing pretty passively, he is shown in this previous week to be at least playing the game a little bit more. He's like actually participating in the game. Like, he's talking to people and he's actively strategizing with people. And to be fair, he still doesn't understand the game that well. I mean, he didn't even understand that he was nominated when he was nominated. Like, he didn't even sit in the chairs. Like, he still doesn't understand the game he's playing, but at least he's still trying to play a little bit more. He's in a bit of a floater situation where he isn't exactly aligned with one side or the other, but he's rather just like existing in the house. He does have a very close tie with Bayleigh, which does technically align him with the women's side of the house, but that's still nothing strong. He's still a pawn in that side, and he still doesn't have that much value as a player. He doesn't really have that much value as an asset. He's kind of just a number, and he's just somebody that like people can just throw up, and like if things go wrong, they can always just send him out of the house. It is said that he is very likable and he has a lot of social capital in the house in that sense, but it's more so just because like he's a funny, likable dude, more so than like, oh, he's like a valuable player that we need to keep around because he's gonna help us with this, that, and the third. Like, he's not any of those things. He's kind of just like a fun number to keep around. So he's not really contributing that much, but at least he's not being an active target. It does seem like he's assuming the role of a pawn a little bit more, but at least he's not like a pawn target. He's just somebody who's like, if things go really bad, he's gonna be the one on the short end of the stick, which is unfortunate. But he's still not in the worst position. He does have a solid connection with Bayleigh that is keeping him safe, at least for now, but it's still nothing solid and it's still nothing really strong. So because of that, I have to keep Todd here at number 8. At number 7, I have Bayleigh. And Bayleigh is starting to cement herself within the power structure a lot better now. With her basically riding or dying with the women of the house, it's very clear which side of the house she is on. But because she's made it so apparent which side of the house she's on, she's actually built herself up as more of an asset than a liability. In the beginning, people saw her as this really explosive wild card that was going to blow people's games up because of how volatile she was. But now she's kind of been able to rein in that anger and that emotion and has been able to put it towards positive work for her game. She's really mended a lot of her relationships with the women, and they trust her so much to the point where they're willing to keep her in the game over a supposed alliance member in Elijah. To be fair, the directors isn't really a real alliance to anybody except for Matt and Elijah, but still, like, they don't have a formal alliance with Bayleigh, but they're still keeping her in the house over somebody like an Elijah. Like, they're actively trying to keep Bayleigh in the house over somebody like Elijah, which is proving that she is now becoming a much more valuable asset for the women's game. The issue is that it's only for the women's side of the house. Bayleigh is still a very clear target for the men's side of the house. With the side of the house that Anthony is controlling, it's still very clear that she is a huge target for them. Where if anybody like a Tola or a Matthew were to win HOH, Bayleigh would be up on the block, Bayleigh would be the target, and Bayleigh would most likely go home. which is very unfortunate of a position to be in, but at least she has some solid allies. She's been able to recover very well ever since losing Donna. Even though she has become a bit of a target, she still has been able to mend her relationships and regain some social capital that is giving her solid footing that could progress her a bit further if her side of the house does end up winning the war. However, I feel that she might be a casualty along the way that leads to her side's success. So because of that, I have to put Bayleigh here at number 7. At number 6, I have Matthew. And Matthew is actually surprising me quite a bit. He's engaging in active strategy a lot more than I thought he ever was. He's really starting to put his foot on the gas, and he's really starting to play this game. The issue is that it's making him a much bigger target as the days go on. It's pretty clear to everybody in the house that Matt is like Anthony's number one guy. Matt is basically like Anthony's ride or die. It's pretty clear that that's what Matthew's position in the house is. Added on to that he has a showmance with Lexus, and now he's probably the biggest target on the guy side. The most interesting thing, though, is that he's not the number one target for the women. It's Tola. Matthew should be the number one target, but he's not. He's seen as the big fish that needs to be fried and needs to be taken out. But people are still choosing to target Tola over Matthew because Matthew still has those really solid inroads with Lexus. And because Lexus has that somewhat connection to the women, they're wanting to keep Matthew around at least for a little bit longer. So even though Matthew is this huge target that the women need to take out ASAP, Matthew is still in a pretty solid position. He's very high up in the ranks on Anthony's side of the house. Even though he technically isn't Anthony's number one, he's essentially Anthony's number one. When looking at like Anthony's pawns and Anthony's like side of the house, Matthew is like number one. Like he is him. He is the guy that Anthony is like residing in the most. So he is probably the most valuable asset on Anthony's side of the house, which is benefiting his game wholeheartedly, and it is putting him in a much better position. The only issue is that he's still a huge target. He's still somebody that the women want to go after and want to take out as like this big resume move. And because they're seeing him as such a big move that needs to be taken out, that means they're probably going to pull the trigger on him a little bit sooner than they actually should, which does worry me about Matthew's longevity in the game. But I still think Matthew is in a pretty solid position with the connections he has. So that's why I have him here at number 6. At number 5, I have Anthony. And this was a really bad week for Anthony. I mean, this entire week was just Anthony getting undermined by Victoria's side of the house. Like, there are two emerging sides in this house. We have Victoria's side and Anthony's side. And I think Anthony's side is going to lose. I think Anthony just doesn't have the support that he needs to in order for his side of the house to win. Does that mean he's going to lose the game? Not necessarily. It just means that he's going to run out of valuable allies much sooner than Victoria's side of the house. That being said, Anthony is still in a great position. He still has an entire army of minions as I want to say, riding behind him. Like, these are all shields in front of him. These are all targets that are going to be targeted before him. However, Anthony is still being seen as the big fish to fry. I know I said that Matthew was a big fish to fry, but Anthony is like an even bigger one. Like, Anthony is the person to take out. Anthony is the target. The only issue is that it's all about timing. If they take Anthony out too soon in this game, then Anthony's side is going to unite together to take out the other side, and that is going to ultimately ruin a lot of the things that the other side has been doing very well. So Anthony has set himself up in a very, very smart and tactical way where if he gets targeted and he gets taken out, the people that are left in the game will come back tenfold and avenge his fallenness or whatever, like in a much stronger capacity, which is very smart on his end. The biggest issue I have with his position is that this week was all about undermining him. Everything he wanted to go his way didn't go his way. He wanted the veto used on Tola. Didn't happen. He wanted Tola to stay. That wouldn't have happened. He wanted the executive veto to be used on Tola so Bayleigh can go up and go home. That didn't happen. He was forced to let go of Vivek, somebody who was a dead loyal ally to him. He was forced to get rid of him, and he was literally in tears losing him. So this was a really bad week for him. He loses one of his strongest allies, and now it's becoming more and more evident the impending civil war that is going to happen in this house. While I think Anthony is going to survive this war, I don't know if he's going to be able to come out on top, and that does worry me, which is why I have him here at number 5. At number 4, I have Lexus, and I was really close to putting Lexus up at number 3 over the person I actually put at number 3, but I decided to keep Lexus at number 4 because I think she's on the wrong side of the war. I think her being on Anthony's side over Victoria's side is going to be her downfall. I think Anthony's side is going to lose this civil war that's going on. I think Anthony's side will lose, and because Lexus is on that side, that means she's gonna lose, and that doesn't spell well for her. However, I do believe that she is in one of the best positions in that side of the house. While there are talks of her like being put up on the block, people don't want her to go up on the block. They want the showmans to go up on the block to try and split them up. But people like Bayleigh still don't want Lexus to go up on the block. At the end of the day, Lexus still has really solid allies and really solid bonds with the women. Even though she isn't actively strategizing with the women as much as she should be, she still has those solid ties to that side of the house that are protecting her for the short term. If she continues to keep those bonds strong, she's going to be set for the long term in this game. And she's going to be in a position where she might not even need to go up on the block for her to lose Matthew. Now, to be fair, her losing Matthew would be an absolute detriment and the big blow to her game, as Matthew was a huge shield in front of her. But with everything that Lexus is doing right now, there's a very strong possibility that she's not going to even need to go up on the block. The issue is that with her being on Anthony's side, I just don't think she's going to come out victorious. Because she's choosing to be on Anthony's side rather than Victoria's side, Lexus is losing a lot of social capital with a lot of the women in power, particularly Victoria. Lexus used to have a pretty solid repertoire with Victoria, but with Lexus choosing Anthony's side over Victoria's side, I fear that Lexus is going to be taken out much sooner than we actually anticipate. Still though, I think Lexus is in a great position. I think she still has very solid ties with a lot of key players in this house, and I honestly think that even if this civil war doesn't end up happening, she's still going to be in a super solid position, and I think she's still going to be able to find a way to maneuver herself through the game, which is why I have her here at number 4. At number 3, I have Kayla, and I was so close to putting Kayla at number 4, but I just couldn't. This week, for me, just cemented like Kayla has very poor stress management. She has very poor emotion regulation. And that's not trying to say like about her as a person. I'm just talking about within the context of this game. We've now seen on 2 different instances, not even 2, we are now seeing in multiple instances that if Kayla is put in high stress and high pressure situations, she can't handle the pressure. And the pressure ends up eating her alive. I mean, we see that when she finds out that her name is being said, she absolutely flips her lid. She goes to Anthony and starts like going on this tirade about how Tola is now her number 1 target and how he needs to go home. And then she does the same thing when she finds out that Matt is supposedly throwing her name under the bus, which, to be fair, is completely valid. Like, if she hears her name is being thrown out, of course she's going to get concerned, because with her name being thrown out there, that means people want to target her. That means people are considering her for her to go up like on the block or something. People are considering her to go home. And that's obviously something that needs to be addressed, and it's obviously super valid as to why she would react in the way that she did. The issue is that she's letting other people see that, and now it's starting to negatively affect her position. had a really, really, really strong bond and a really solid position with Victoria and Avery. But with her now starting to emerge as this bigger target because of her reactions, now she's starting to become a legitimate target. Like when Elijah was saying that Kayla was being thrown out under the bus, it was just him just throwing out bait and seeing if people would take it. But now people are actually starting to consider Kayla as a target that needs to be taken out, which is very concerning. The only shield that Kayla really has in front of her is Bayleigh. So if Bayleigh goes home really soon, that leaves Kayla in a very vulnerable position. Let's assume that like Tola were to win HOH, right? Who would Tola put up? Most likely Bayleigh and Kayla, and that's horrible for Kayla because she's losing either way, either losing a shield in Bayleigh or her herself going home. It's all around horrible for her. This week was horrible for her. The only reason I don't have her low is that she still has her solid bonds. She didn't lose any of her positioning with like the women's side. Like she's still a pivotal player on that side of the house that is very integral in a majority of the decision making. However, she's starting to emerge as a bigger and bigger target, and that just really concerns me, and it just doesn't spell well out for her prospects. So with all of that in mind, I have to put Kayla here at number 3. Now at number 2, I have Avery. And as much as I don't want Avery to be in this good of a position, I have to admit that she is. Avery is really playing up this like loyalty thing. Like it's very clear that Avery wants to ride and die with the veterans. It's very apparent that Avery is like Victoria's number 1. It's very clear that Avery is just a pawn in Victoria's game, and that she's most likely either going to be the losing 0 vote finalist against Victoria or is going to be cut in 3rd place because of Victoria. It just doesn't spell out well for her in that sense. However, in terms of her positioning, she's great. I mean, she still has a lot of solid allies. She has people like Anthony on the other side who still trust her a lot. And within the ranks of the women, she's up there. She's second in command behind Victoria, essentially. Like the fact that, like, going back to last week, the fact that Avery didn't want the Dennis flip to go through, and because of that the flip didn't go through, that shows that she's still in a great position. And the fact that the safety or the chain of rejection, she was the second to last person standing, shows that she doesn't have people going after her. She doesn't have people outside of her alliance going after her. Someone like Kayla does have people outside of the alliance going after her, but with Avery, she doesn't. It's just that she's not in as powerful of a position as the person I have at number 1. Because of that, I couldn't manage to put her higher, but that's not to like diminish any of the positive work that she's done. Like she is in a super, super, super solid position. I genuinely don't see Avery going home anytime soon. I don't even see Avery going up on the block as a pawn anytime soon. Mind you, like things could change in an instant. Somehow Avery might blow up her game and she could end up being on the block next week, considering how like erratic this cast can be sometimes. But overall, I think Avery's in a very solid position and I don't see her going home anytime soon. And I think if she can maintain this solid social positioning, she's going to be in this game for the long haul. Is she going to be in it for it to win? That's still up for debate. But all in all, she's still in a very good position, which is why I have her here at number 2. At number 1, the person I believe to be in the best position in the house is still Victoria. She has an iron grip on this game. Like, she has this game in a chokehold. Like, she is absolutely dominating this game. I don't know if that's because this cast was kind of built for her, because there are definitely a lot more stronger women than like strong men on this cast, but that's besides the point. Victoria is doing great right now. She is the head of the women's side of the house, and she's probably going to come out on top in the war of Victoria versus Anthony. It's basically like minions versus minions. I think Victoria's minions are going to come out on top over Anthony's minions. And that puts her in an even stronger position because that forces Anthony to work much closer to her. Mind you, I don't think it's very good for her to be starting this war very soon. I feel like if she could maybe like keep it off or like steer it off from like maybe one more round or two, then it'd be a lot more better. But because she wants to start it earlier, that does concern me a little bit. However, Victoria has absolute control over basically everything going on in the house. Like, if there's something that's going to show how good of a position somebody is in, it's like it's a knockout comp. But more than that is a chain of safety. And she's come out on top on both of them. In the majority HOH competition, she won that. And in this safety, or not the safety chain, but in this chain of rejection, she wasn't rejected. Like, 2 separate instances in 2 separate weeks was she shown that she was on top and that people trusted her and people didn't want to target her. Despite her being a veteran, despite her being this huge all-star threat that should be taken out much sooner rather than later, she is still in such a solid position. Everybody trusts her, nobody wants to target her, and everybody wants to go deep in this game with her. Everybody trusts Victoria as an ally, which is crazy to me because it's like, did you watch her original season? Victoria is like the epitome of like an untrustworthy ally, yet everybody is seeming to trust her. This just shows that Victoria is putting in the work this season. She is putting her social game on blast. Like, she is going full throttle and absolutely demolishing everything right now. And if she can continue the solid work she's doing right now, she's going to have a very easy win on her hands. The only issue is that she's Victoria, and there's always the potential that she's going to do something crazy and ensue some sort of chaos to try and blow up the game, and it's going to end up blowing up back in her face, and she's going to end up being in a worse position, and then she's going to lose the game over something stupid. But if she doesn't do something crazy like that, I can definitely foresee her being the potential winner of this season. It's just a matter of her maintaining that, and as it stands right now, she is in the best position in the house, which is why I have her here at number 1. Overall, I loved this week of Big Brother Canada. It was full of everything that I love. It was full of active strategy. It was full of drama. There weren't any fights, but there was some pretty dang close ones. And a twist that might be a little bit unfair, might be a little bit overpowered, but it produced absolutely amazing television. I mean, just seeing the downfall of Vivek in literal seconds, like literal moments. Like, he woke up that morning literally safe. He went from not even touching the block, not even an option, to evicted. Like, if that doesn't spell out like downfall, I don't know what is. I don't know what is, and I don't know what will. It was just so entertaining to watch. And it was just like, I don't want to say it was peak reality TV, but it was definitely very solid reality TV to watch. And it was so entertaining. And I loved every second of it. I just hope that it doesn't get like reused in the future, because that would kind of take away the magic of the moment. But still, this moment was absolutely insane. I absolutely loved it. It was so entertaining. It was like some wild roller coaster, seeing everything go on. And even before that, this week was producing on all fronts. It was like shooting on all rounds, and it was overall a very good week of Big Brother. The setup that it had for these future weeks is going to be crazy, and like I said in the past, I can't wait to see how this unfolds. But that's the end of this video. Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share with your friends if you have any of those, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.